Hello, this is Dr. Jean, dear future people. Well, this is going to be our toughest video yet. Toughest in terms of if this was heard by a 2023 person. You see, for them, it could be a little bit hard that although we do not go against, but we provide an alternative for their most sacred and ingrained beliefs. And they might not be ready for that, so they might get angry. But luckily, they are not listening. And you, dear future people, you will understand. So let us introduce a model. The model of conscience. Well, what is conscience? Conscience is the functionality of the soul seed. In other words, the soul seed is aware of its possibilities. It being soul seed means that the soul has potentiality, okay? And we are going to use a metaphor by approximating the possibilities, the robustness of conscience with the depth of the ocean. So we're going to say that the soul is like an ocean, deep and robust. The part penetrated by sunlight is termed conscience. So conscience is the awareness of the possibility, okay? Here, sunlight is a symbol of communication. And we are saying here that conscience, okay, is very much influenced by communication. Outside stimuli, the input, okay? But again, conscience is the surface layer, okay? The awareness that we have possibilities. And then the soul seed is the robust richness of possibilities that we have uniquely in our soul. So let's see. Conscience, since it's very susceptible, very sensitive to outside stimuli, inputs, communication, may be coordinated and standardized through communication, right? So in other words, if we have education, if we have propaganda, if we have ideology, okay, then these things can influence the surface layer, okay, like the sunlight, okay, that kind of makes it lighter, okay. So objectivity is the idea that in our soul we have this surface layer that can be coordinated, standardized, and then we have an interpersonal coordination, an interpersonal standard, okay? Things that we accept by consensus, and this surface layer will be then profoundly affected by this consensus, okay? And whatever we accept by consensus, we call objective truths, okay? Which is a contradiction in terms, but hey, that's what it is. So the soul itself, the soul seed, the richness of possibilities, okay, that is deep inside, is very little affected by all this, you see. The soul is not a subject for coordination because the coordination and standardization, okay, only affect this surface. And objective description also doesn't apply because the soul seed is full of possibilities, so it's extremely rich. Okay. So now, once we are here, then we can elaborate a little bit further and say that the means of coordination and standardization of conscience is logic. Okay. So there was common trains of thoughts. Okay. That are more or less independent of personal differences, okay? So logic is a common pattern of how people digest information, communicate information, and then act upon information, okay? But again, logic is objective only as it is based on these common patterns. And these common patterns are not set in stone, although if you look at mathematics, they seem that they are. But these are really common patterns, and they are, of course, not just, they don't just exist, but they are communicated by education and influence of common traditions and common life experience, okay? So logic is a reflection of rationality. Rationality is the belief that people behave primarily by logic. We know that that is not true, but in 2023 people believe that, oh yeah, well, if it's not true, it should be true, okay? And then they try to pretend that that is the case. But again, logic, okay, is nothing else but common patterns. Common patterns that we standardize, and then we try to coordinate the surface layer of the soul by this logic, okay? And again, traditions, educations, media, propaganda, ideology, all of these things, or I don't know, sacred texts or whatever, they are means, okay, to inculcate logic into this surface layer, okay? So, strong effect by coordination may cause tension between the surface and the deep. We said this when we were talking about the thinker traveler, right? So we need to understand that while coordination, okay, enhances uniformity, in the deep there is uniqueness. And if this tension is not relieved somehow, if it's not harmonized, okay, so that there's a harmony between this coordination and this uniqueness, okay, then tension unresolved is going to cause stress and depression. So you see where we are going here? We are going to the direction of explaining why there is a need for individualized thinking. Because you see, the soul has a lot of uniqueness, and there has to be a maintained individual, unique, life experience based maintenance, okay, so that we keep on harmonizing these two things, uniqueness and some degree of uniformity that is necessary for coordination, so that the community can work together, okay? But we have subjective thinking, local uniqueness, which is based on robustness of the soul, the huge deep foundation that can be investigated only in small bits. So if you want to investigate the soul, then you're like this, you see? You are sending a probe to see what possible reactions you might evoke from the soul. But the soul is really very deep and very huge. So you need to kind of generalize from your tiny little bit of investigation so that you understand even part of it, okay? But what I'm trying to say here is that yes, some degree of uniformity may be necessary, especially if the community is in distress, okay? And this uniformity is coming to you through coordination and standardization, okay? And this coordination and standardization can be, through traditions, educations, and media. And this will be enhancing uniformity that is naturally against the deep robustness of the soul seed. So you always have to work to relieve this tension so that there is a harmony maintained between this relative uniformity necessary for cooperation and maintained uniqueness, okay, which provides the richness for the community. To be aware that we have a lot of possibilities, okay, and we are able to use these possibilities without suppressing them, okay. So we need the least amount of uniformity necessary for communication and cooperation, but we maintain also the possibility of alternative ways. So now, if you want to kind of enforce violently objectivity, that is coordination and standardization, then what you're going to do is you enlarge, okay, the outside world, okay, so that you kind of enlarge the significance of the input, and you minimize the depth of the soul, saying that the soul is really nothing much more than the surface layer of consciousness, whereas the input comes from something huge, something objective, something coordinated, something standardized, which we call the physical universe, okay? So you have this huge outside material universe and the small soul, and that is a trick, okay? Because obviously it's not like that. But even here, did you notice that if you just purely focusing on the sizes, the physical sizes, okay, then you see that from the atomic level to the size of the man, okay, it's about the same difference as between the size of the man and the observable universe. Did you see that? So in other words, even here, of course, you see that man is the measure of things, okay? But again, this is all a trick. This is not true. And let's call the bluff, okay? The soul is also immense and robust, and the soul seed is full of potentiality, and it is huge. So we are not saying that the outside physical world is not large. Yes, it is large, but the soul is also large, you see. And this is the most fundamental idea that the little tiny 2023 person will not understand, okay? Because there is this ingrained thing that objectivity, coordination, standardization, the outside physical, concrete, measurable universe by the scientific method, okay, is something huge and robust, and the soul is this tiny little bit of thing. And why is that? Why is that? Well, let me tell you why. Because of this sentence here. What I cannot measure, I ignore, and I cannot measure the soul. Remember, we have this small probe to kind of try to investigate small spots of this depth. And then we call behaviorism when we identify all the possibilities of the soul seed with some of the reactions that we get from our tiny little probes, okay? So we poke the soul a little bit and it jerks, and then this jerking we identify with the richness of the possibilities that the soul has. And that's of course foolish, okay? Is the brain a computer? Oh my God, okay? So in other words, I created the computer, and then I identified the model that I call the computer with what I model, which is the soul and the soul seed. Okay, so this is folly, and yet this is where people are in 2023. There's nothing I can do about it. Okay, so this is a contradiction in terms, right? I identify my model with the things that I'm trying to model, and since this model is method driven, in other words, I model so that I can measure. Whatever the model is not modeling, okay, what cannot be measured by the scientific method, I simply ignore. And because most of the soul I cannot measure by the scientific method, I just reduce the size of the soul and then enlarge the significance of what I can measure, and that is the physical universe. And you see, people do not understand this. Well, it's so simple. So, but again, let's not get bogged down in details. So, robustness and uniqueness, which are the primary properties of the soul seed, can be measured by experiment no better than searching the seafloor by this tiny little probe with a searchlight. Okay, and and we call the bluff. So, standardized objective facts, events, objects, units, entities are in interaction not only with coordinated conscience, but also the depth of the soul. You see, on the surface, okay, yeah, you get a simple reaction to a simple input, yes, but even this simple reaction will, time to time, be revealed as different based on the possibilities of the soul. The sensitivity, the unique association, the unique life experience will modify these standard reactions, and then all of a sudden you see, oh my God, there are reactions that I cannot explain. Why is that? Because I imagined that these reactions were standard, but they are not. It's just that common things being common, common patterns tend to repeat themselves. But behind the common patterns, there is the possibility, okay, of uniqueness, the potentiality, okay. So the interaction is unique, but you have to have the refinement to understand the unique reactions. That one reaction is not exactly the same as the other, okay. This interaction is termed as life experience. So in other words, the interaction, okay, between patterns in life and their digestion, their integration, okay, is always unique. Sometimes you just do not notice it, okay, because you generalize or you ignore things, you ignore differences, and then you see standard reactions. But there are no standard reactions. If you are refined enough, you will see that every reaction is really different. Every reaction is unique because of life experience, because unconsciously, okay, you do digest things uniquely. Objectivity and existence are tools created by suppressing unique interactions and interpretations. You see, objectivity by definition is the idea of suppressing what is unique. So yes, objectivity is important because we have to have some kind of consensus. And please understand that objectivity is always consensus based. So since consensus has a domain, the community in which it originally was established, therefore objectivity also has a domain. Okay, so if something is invariant to this person and that person, it's not invariant to a group of persons. You see, because this group established this consensus, but the next group may not have, because they have vastly different life experiences, because they live in a different area or live in a different timeline or whatever. Okay? So tensions between life experience and coordination cause suffering. So this is the thing. You see, in Vitologia, we demand unique mental activity. And you need unique mental activity because you always have to work on the reconciliation of the pragmatic, practical coordination and standardization and your uniqueness. Okay, and that cannot be neglected. It has to be done minute by minute, always. Otherwise, you're going to get tension and suffering from that. So coordination taken to the extreme, when it is exaggerated, okay, it's called propaganda, okay? And that can be based on ideology, usually causes idolatry, and empire, which is always based on idolatry. So, we have choices and decisions, okay? But the problem is that whenever we have choices and decisions, there is a pre-manufactured, prefabricated, okay, set of units that we can choose. We choose this or we choose this. But if you, based on your life experience, if you understand that these choices are in fact oversimplifications, because the possibilities are always there to go beyond any kind of set choices, okay? Between this road and this road, okay, there is a more difficult but potential this road, okay, that you may create for yourself. So robustness overrides decisions and choices that you are given as fixed, as set, okay? You have to have creative thinking and see a potential road where there's not an established road. Avoid dangerous waters except if you have the craft and skill to navigate them. Avoid, I don't know, huge mountains. Avoid barriers except if you can jump or fly over them. Like this. Okay? So the more mental organization, the more mental activity you have, the more unique life experiences you have, okay, the less these barriers are going to be relevant for you. And the less you have to say yes or no to a question. Because you may see a third path, an alternative path to these. Because you are able to overcome barriers. So that it's not like there's this established road and that established road and it's either this or that. No, you are able to say, okay, I'm not gonna go this way, I'm not gonna go this way, I'm gonna go this way. There's no established road, okay, I'm gonna create one. Now of course this is dangerous because as we mentioned before, non-established paths are extremely difficult. And if you overextend yourself, if you overwork yourself, then that's going to end in disaster. And that's why you have tradition to help you, okay? But all I'm saying here is that your capacity to transcend these barriers, okay, will make these choices and decisions matter less, okay? So choices and decisions, coordinated solutions you only need if you do not have enough creative thinking, okay? And remember, coordinated solutions come from standardized problems, okay? So people, when you see a problem, then you may see a problem uniquely, according to your own sensitivities and according to your own priorities, okay? So when you see a physical or mathematical problem, okay, that is highly coordinated, highly standardized. Why? Because it's artificial, okay? But in terms of a real life problem, you may see the problem entirely differently. And if you see that problem, it is no longer prefabricated, okay? Because you can interpret that problem from a wider perspective, okay? So resistance barriers, robustness transcends. So the soul seed has natural robustness, okay? Which you need to, of course, work on, okay? But it transcends these prefabricated paths, these established roads, okay? So you use your life experience and you maintain your local uniqueness and you let your subjectivity, your uniqueness manifest. Okay, and you need objectivity less. Because if you are more organized, okay, then you can cooperate with others without much standardization. That is the idea, you see. Because the more organized you are, the more you understand that you belong to an organism, okay, which includes others. So your willingness to cooperate and to understand others is more. And that is true not only at the individual level, but group level, societal level, etc. Even a robust soul is not able to transcend all barriers, of course. There is a limitation of what you can do, what you can recall from all the potentialities that you have, okay? If a problem is too overwhelming, okay, you call for help, okay? So it is not your strength not to call for help. No, your strength is to understand that you are part of a community, okay? And you call your friends, okay, to help you. Even if it's just emotional support, you call on your tradition, your traditional ways to help you, okay? Because you cannot do it all. And that is true not only at the individual level. So one group will have to call on friendly groups also, okay? So if all else fails, then the ultimate robustness, a living reality that cannot end, never dies, and which is deeply connected to the soul, which is its non-separate manifestation, like a drop of water returning to the living ocean. So what I'm saying here is that if everything seemed to be hopeless, then you will understand that not everything is hopeless. There's no situation in which everything is hopeless. Why? Because you are not separated, okay? Because you are part of the organic whole, okay? And the organic whole is permanent. It's ever changing, yes. It changes even radically over time, but it lives and it cannot die. And you are part of this in this form or that form, like this drop of water, that I don't know, steam or current or whatever. So ultimately, we're not going to die. And we're not going to die because we are not units. Not because we are reborn as this other person, which is also a unit. No, it is because we are not a unit. We are important organic part of the whole organism. So choices and decisions, their sad fixed nature is dissolved in robustness. Okay, so notice that it is children or young adults that need sad fixed nature of things. Like they need a lot of competition. Competition is, of course, it's very sad. It's consensus based. But mature, robust organic systems simply transcend existing solutions and create new ones. Okay. Like the water overflows the barriers because it has a lot of energy mobilized by organization, by life experiences, the abundance of life experiences, okay? Like at light speed, the meaning of distance and time lose some of their significance. So for an organic, robust system, problem can be overflown, dissolved into a great organization and the energy that comes from this great organization. But again, even an organic or robust system can be overwhelmed. You know, that there are things that we cannot possibly react to in the most optimal manner and even unique manner, and we need to call for help. And whenever we call for help, we understand that we are important organic part of a greater reality. Okay, so we will never die in this great organic reality. Now, we had this model of the robust soul seed and the conscience and the choices and transcending choices. And let's contrast what science as a religion tells us about these things. You see, science is wonderful so far as we understand that the domain of science is what can be investigated by the scientific method. And there are things that can be investigated quite well from the scientific methods, especially very artificial things. But there are things that are not really amenable to investigation by the scientific method. And if we ignore that, then we have a very limited slice of reality, and we ignore everything else so that we enlarge this little slice, okay? And when we do that, that is when we use science as an ideology, an all-encompassing worldview, a religion, a philosophy that we base our life on, a religion, okay? A community practice based on science as a religion. And let's be very clear. From whatever we said about conscience and choices, it should be abundantly clear that we think that science as a religion is a complete failure, okay? And it is a failure because science is limited to the domain of the scientific method. And if you extend your domain artificially, then your truth value, your relevance is going to suffer greatly, and it does, okay? So you have all these projections, and the observable universe, of course, is a projection of your tiny little slice of reality that you are able to investigate with science, you know? But this projection is nothing else but a virtual world that you created for yourself. So let's investigate this a little bit further. So how is science as an ideology, as a worldview, as a religion, okay, as a philosophy that turns into a religion because it influences our lives so much and it influences our behavior so much? So the first and most important thing is, remember this? Look, this. So here's conscience and here's the depth of the soul, okay? And science, okay, coordinates this, and then, since it coordinates that, you will all of a sudden see the following. Look, standard observer, objectivity based on consensus, okay? So science believes that the observer can fall out of the equation because the observer is not important. Why? Because the observer is coordinated, okay? So local uniqueness is completely and intentionally excluded from this process of investigation. So standing aside from this separate observed object, so in scientific investigation, you have a standard observer and the separated object. Now, science believes that this separated object, for example, a table, okay? Table is a separate object, okay? It has a fixed nature with fixed properties. Now, science would not understand that these properties are based on the aspects of how I investigate that table, okay? So, if I artificially made up that the notion that for me the most important thing is the number of legs of the table, okay? Then the legs of the table is going to be a property of that table. It's an artificial object with artificial angles, okay? And I believe that object is independent of me and independent of the rest of the reality, so it's separate, and that it has a property. Why? Because I set up a variable that is important for me, okay? The number of the legs of the table is important for me, and I investigate it, and the table has some answers to my question. It has 4 legs or 3 legs, okay? So, standardized observer, a separate observed object, which has a fixed nature with intrinsic qualities, properties. This can be described quantitatively somehow, okay? And that is part of a physical universe, okay? And of course, we might also add that the separate observed object is not much influenced by the investigation, by the process of observation, okay? So without this, the scientific method is nothing. This is all necessary for the scientific method. Now, what about uniqueness and change? Uniqueness and change is not very well described by science, because the scientific method is the basis of science. So whatever you cannot measure, you are going to ignore. And any differences in what you cannot measure are going to be lost for you. So everything looks very similar. Science. Science says that conditions can be fixed by controlling a few known parameters. Okay, so I fix the temperature, I fix the pressure, I fix the light, okay? And then I believe that I fixed everything, because everything else will remain the same. And I call this an experiment. But notice here that when you do an experiment, you only are able to fix a few things that you believe is important. But you cannot fix things that you don't know, and they might be important. And that is especially relevant in my field, medicine, medical science. All of a sudden it turns out that you didn't control for something that you didn't think was important, or you didn't think it would change, and it is important that it did change. Only that it was outside of what you thought you would be able to fix. Science. A few experiments can be used to make the inference that under similar conditions and similar observations can be made, assuming total control of all underlying conditions. But again, you might not be aware that something else has changed in the meantime, okay? And that all of a sudden, high cholesterol means something else than it did 20 years ago, because there are circumstances that changed that you did not control for, because you use your 20 or 30 or 40-year-old studies and you assume that everything remained the same. You see? So according to science, reality is fixed. Patterns are permanent. The totality of reality can be described by using only a few dimensions. You see the problem? So science makes predictions that there are permanent laws, okay? And then, because it investigates reality only from certain aspects, certain angles, using the scientific method, okay, it kind of is like self-fulfilling prophecy. Of course, it's gonna see some fixed outcomes because it started out by fixing the conditions, okay? So yeah, there is relative permanence in science, but all of that is artificial, okay? So science, of course, for science, reality is relatively uniform and can be described by standard average, and everything else is an error, okay? Yes, because science is very highly and artificially fixed, okay? So it gets these little spots of reality because it ignores most of the other things and fills in the gaps with generalizations and oversimplifications, okay? So in science, reality is divided and is made up by separate entities, of course, because you say that you investigate only the elephants, and everything being equal, the elephants will do this if I do this to them, and do that if I do that to them. But in the meantime, things are changing because the elephants, okay, are reacting not only to what you think they are reacting, but to most other things as well. And you may not be able to control for those other things. You think that everything being equal, things will not change, but in fact, things do change. So, science. An existing physical universe is made up by uniform separate units, subject to uniform permanent laws, having a fixed, quantifiable, verifiable nature with a small set of predetermined properties. It's a lot of nonsense. Okay, this is not true. Reality is not like that. Okay, and here we're back to slide 10 in our very first presentation. And here is what we think about science. That it is a worldview based on the extreme of mental inertia. Now, understand, science is very, very good in describing what it can describe. Small minutiae of reality. Sure. And that is wonderful because science has the patience to observe deeply, and that is wonderful. The problem is not with the observation or the investigation. The problem is with the extension. You see, you have these little spotty little results of the whole reality, and you fill up the gaps between this experiment and that experiment, this investigation with that is investigation, with bombastic, oversimplified generalities. And that is the Achilles heel, sorry, I used the proper name, that is the weakness of science, okay? And any worldview based on this must be simplistic, okay? Because of this extension, because of this linear mechanistic extrapolation of things. Permanent laws do not exist except for 5-year-olds, okay? There are no permanent rules and permanent laws. There are common patterns, yes, and they're very useful, but these do change. So on the extreme of organized mental activity, as we said, things are much more complex. Yeah, generalizations and simplifications are useful sometimes, but we should not be pretentious to see that they are exclusive. That if you do not think as I do, then you are stupid, and you need to be oppressed and killed and whatever. No. Science is not omnipotent at all. Not at all. So, what does religion do? Religion is trying to explain the total reality. And religion admits that total reality from one aspect, from one angle is physical reality. But that's only one angle, okay? Religion understands that all is an important part of reality, okay? That reality is very complex and everything in reality is important. Religion believes that mind activity is relevant to and arises from everyday life, creating community practices. Yes, religion says that reality is infinite, religion says that reality is organic, religion says that reality is locally relevant, okay? But religion based on these things, okay, differ in form. You have this religious tradition and that religious tradition. And whereas religion starts out to understand that reality is complex, it may reduce things the same way as science did. It may cause uniformity to be important. It may establish time and space limits, and its applicability may be extended as universal or absolute or independent of locality, based on your religious tradition. So certain religions, certain religious traditions, certain religious institutions, okay, may take this and reduce it to that. Right? Now, in Vitologia, we don't do this. Okay? We are saying that on the extreme of organized mental activity, global reality is flexible, subject to formative influences by the mind, infinite, continuous, highly variable and complex, and enclosed by directional relationship with the active mind. So we do not reduce reality, no. No. There's no time limit, there's no universal, there's no absolute, there's no uniformity. Okay? We say that global reality is highly complex. It's a multi-dimensional matrix. Okay? So, let's try to understand how these differ: science, religion, and Vitologia. So in science, there's a fixed, physical, outside objective reality, dividable to uniform, separate units, subject to a low number of set rules. Like natural laws, for example. In religion, fixed or not fixed, partly physical, objective and subjective, outside or not outside. Reality is subject to a variable number of set or non-set rules. So what I'm trying to say here is that religion is much more diverse than science because it's less coordinated, and you have different religious traditions, and some believe that reality is relatively fixed, some believe that they are not fixed, some believe that it's mostly physical, some believe it's not so physical, more objective, less objective. So in other words, religion is a little bit more free in its worldview, okay? Because there's a large number of religious traditions, and a religion can be like this or this or this or that. Now, in Vitologia, there is a living reality of infinite complexity, which is not objective. How can it be objective? And dimensions are also infinite, okay? And patterns always change, but underlying continuity and organic unity is there. So you may have common patterns, okay, and that depending on your sensitivity, your interest, your scope of attention, your perspective, may seem to be permanent relatively, but they really change, okay? And there's an infinite number of ways that things can change. So in Vitologia, reality is much more potentiality driven, because this can happen and this can happen and this can happen and this can happen, and there are common patterns, yes, okay, but even these common patterns change in time, in space, according to changing conditions and circumstances, okay. And because reality is complex like this, it's a living organism, okay, that means that every part of reality, no matter its size, is going to be important. And whatever you are aware, and the wider your perspective, the more things, more patterns you are aware, okay, whatever you are aware, everything is important. And if everything is important and there's constant change, then it's not like, okay, I got enlightened and that's it. From now on, I understand everything. No. Enlightenment needs to be maintained, you see. So you have science as a worldview, you have religion as a worldview, and you have Vitologia as a worldview. And with that, I thank you for your attention, and goodbye for now.